Okay, folks, back again for another video lecture recording. Today's topic we're going to look at in marketing is the area of setting the right price. So on that, let's get down to your presentation area. And we'll open your slides. Now, as I said, setting the right price, always a difficult thing inside in business. How do you know what the right price is? So let's have a look and see the various elements we need to consider. Of course, you couldn't just pull a figure out of the air, but are people going to pay for it? Probably not. So getting the right price can be a challenge. So we start to look at some of these learning outcomes, describe the procedure for setting the right price. Again, like everything, there is a process and a procedure, going through the fine steps. Identify the legal and ethical constraints on pricing decisions. And then explain how discounts, geographic pricing, and other pricing tactics can be used to fine-tune the base price. And lastly, the remaining two learning outcomes discuss product line pricing. So you can have various product lines. Now this is more directed towards physical products as such, although we do have it in services, where you're selling, for example, services to professionals, to businesses, or selling them to general public, and then you'll have different segments and so on. So you'd have different products and different service level offerings, excuse me. And then describe the role of pricing during periods of inflation and recession. And God knows you're going to go through a number of these in your lifetime, as I have done, and people of my age. So how to set the price of a product or a service. So let's look at the procedure. We need to establishing the pricing goals. Okay, so we need to estimate the demand. What's your market size? Who are the potential customers? How many of those do you feel confident are going to buy your product? Then we need to look at the costs of producing that product or service. And then, of course, a bit of a margin, a profit. So they're the three fundamentals: market size, the cost of the product or the service, and a little bit of profit. And then we need to choose our pricing strategy. How are we going to do this? Is it based on the market segments, based on all the data we've collected from our market? Are you going to sell it in large cities, or in urban, rural towns, or different countries, and so on? So these all influence our different prices, because you can charge different prices in different locations. That's a given. And then, of course, we need to fine-tune the pricing tactics. And in this case, we need to be cognizant and aware of what other competitors are doing. How are they pricing their products and competing against you, or how can you compete against them based on price? And of course, we do all of the above. We say we end up with the right price, but it just doesn't stop there, because you're constantly fine-tuning it. Now, some prices don't change over many months or years even. If anything, they might go up gradually. Doctors' fees, consultants' fees, and so on, so are gradually going up. You very rarely see them coming down, except there's hints in some areas, like the introduction of these private clinics, the likes of Affidea or Affidia, whatever way you want to pronounce it, and because they're able to offer bulk supply, so to speak, of their services, they can reduce, and they make it a lot easier for consumers. But enough on that. So establishing the pricing goals: are we profit oriented? Are we sales oriented? Or we just want to stay as is, status quo, not the group? Jesus help! Long before your time, I think they still exist. They come out of their coffins every so often to want to do a return gig. Anyway, profit oriented: are you setting a price to maximize your profit regardless of cost? Keep your cost there, but I want to make more and more profit. Or is it sales oriented? Are you reducing your price to get more volume of sales, which is a very valid tactic and mostly what people do? Drop price, sell more, so your total revenue will increase. You might remember this from your Leaving Cert economics. and then status quo. So the pricing strategy. So a basic long-term pricing framework, which establishes the initial price for a product or a service, and is intended and the intended direction for price movements over the product life cycle. So essentially, you might have introductory pricing for a product for to get it into the market and get people going, and then you might increase the price over time, and then as there's more and more competition, you might start to reduce price by reducing profitability, but at the same time you're also reducing your costs because you're getting better at doing what you're doing. And as the product goes into decline with more and newer technologies, better quality from competitors, you might start to reduce the price to hold on to a few more customers until eventually you phase it out. So that's the typical product life cycle is like that kind of S curve, and it declines. So pricing would have the same effect. So when we look at again further into pricing strategy, we look at price skimming. That's where a firm charges a high introductory price, often coupled with a heavy promotion. Okay, so a high introductory, that's price skimming, charge as much as possible and clean up. And then penetration pricing. So a firm charges a relatively low price for a product initially, as a way to reach more and more of their customers. And then the status quo pricing, charging a price identical to or very close to the competition's price. Now you have to be very careful on the status quo, because are you making enough profit on that basis? You may be, and you might be looking at ways of reducing your costs. So the two main goals of any kind of business is increase revenues and reduce costs. That's the goal, and the more you increase revenues, the more you reduce costs. The gap then between these two areas here, up and down, that's your profit. But if you look at the middle one here, penetration pricing, and for example, if you take your Sky or Virgin Media, you'll get all these offerings, for 6 months at 30 euros, and then goes up to 60 euros per month thereafter, and sign in for a 2-year contract. That's what we mean by penetration pricing. Special offers, introductory deals, to get people in to buy the product. In same, for example, with cars, giving a price reduction, get you in onto one of those PCPs and so on. So price skimming, when we have inelastic demand. In other words, no matter what price you charge for a product, your demand doesn't change. Okay, so you have a high price, you still have people wanting to buy it. Unique advantages are it's superior. So it's for example, look at that restaurant in Dublin that was selling sandwiches for 90 euros and they were sold out within a couple of days. Why? Because it was unique. It was a superior product. It had very top of the range meat as such, and as a consequence, people were willing to pay 90 euros for a freaking beef sandwich, essentially. Legal protection of the product, particularly in this pharmaceutical industry, they do price skim, and that, it's not a negative term. And the reason why, they have patent protection for 7 years. And so the sooner they get the product out there, before the 7 years is up, if they get it out within the first year, excellent. You have 6 years of protection. No one else can introduce the same drugs or whatever the case may be, or medicines, because you're the pharmaceutical company, you're protected under patent. But all hell breaks loose then after the 7 years. All your competitors can come in, and they will come in and feed on it, because they know that you're charging. So some drugs can cost thousands, hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars for rare cancer treatments and so on and so on. That's price skimming. Why? Because they need to make back the money that they invested in the R&D in the first instance. Because on average, a new drug costs somewhere in the region of $20 billion. $20 billion to produce, fully produce and test and so on average. by the large pharmas, the AstraZeneca's, not in this case of the COVID vaccine, but generally these companies, and Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer and so on. That's why they can be so profitable. That's why people invest in their shares, because they might think that some new drug coming out, bang, they know they're going to make big profits. Technological breakthrough, again, you might have, for instance, companies when they first came out with 3D printers, for example. They were extremely expensive, and you couldn't get them for ordinary domestic use as such, but they were primarily for industry because they were expensive machines. But as time came on, more and more competitors came into the market, so prices started to come down. Now you can pick one up for a couple of €100 and 3D print simple stuff as such. And then blocked entry to competitors. So where you might have a completely legal protection, it kind of follows on through the legal protection above up here, but you might have actually bought the suppliers of the only components that are used. Therefore, competitors can't get at those suppliers. Therefore, you've blocked your competitors, and in that way, you're kind of moving towards a monopoly. So that gives you a license to be able to charge higher prices because no one else can provide those products as such. So penetration pricing, and we look at the advantages of it. It discourages or blocks competition. It boosts sales and provides large profit over a period of time, and can justify production expansion. So when you have such a higher price, you're enticed to produce more and more because you can see that the demand is there and it's increasing, and the people are willing to pay these high prices. Therefore, I need to produce more and more of these. Okay. The disadvantages requires gear up for mass production, and that's huge capital investment to be able to go at that level, and selling large volumes at low prices. So if you're looking at penetration pricing, your profit or your margin is quite low, because the whole idea is get the product out there, get it out there, make it available to people, such that you can entice from competitors. And then strategy to gain market share may fail. So the risk in that is that maybe your competitors might say, well, Mark Cashin's a new company coming in here, he's trying to undersell us and get into the market, let's drop our prices down. And they can drop the prices down sufficiently enough that you're not making any profit and you go out of business. And quite a legitimate tactic by the competitors. So you have to be careful of that. So sometimes we say you need to have deep pockets if you're going to take on such a risky maneuver in terms of pricing. And then the status quo pricing, the disadvantages, simplicity. For we don't change prices. We're happy enough with the profits as is, and we keep going and we can have a guaranteed level of income. We know what our costs are, so we know we're going to be making profit over the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years based on the current situation. So we won't do anything. And then the strategy may ignore demand and or cost. So costs could go up, therefore because you're not increasing your prices, you're making smaller margins. Or if you're driving your costs down and you're still making the same profit, you might be too delayed in reducing price, and competitors could come in, and it's very hard, and particularly in mass markets and mature markets like the food industry, for example, that could be to your detriment, because if somebody switches to a different brand or different product, it's extremely difficult to get them back again. So where do we have from this? So again, the review of this, you have established the pricing goals, estimate the demand, costs and profits, and then choose the right strategy. Fine-tune the pricing, set the price, and then evaluate the results. So this is where, again, you crucify me for this, if you remember your economics, if you did economics, sir, but price sensitivity, demand and price sensitivity, that's where we have these elastic and inelastic situations. So you can see here on the right hand side, just use my cursor here, in this area here, you want to either have a high cost price skimming, or low high price, which is price skimming, or low price, you want to penetrate into the market. But this evaluation results, so sometimes you might tweak the price down ever so slightly to hold on to your market share, or to fend off against other competitors. So this loop here, as you can see, fine tune the base price, keep adapting it, setting your price evaluate the results if we reduce it, because remember, if you reduce it too much, the demand could shoot up, which means your manufacturing or your production can't keep up with demand, and that can be a negative, simply because people are going to go to other products, and then word of mouth gets out and say, look, they're always out of stock, or you can never get their product, it's and so on, therefore here's a great alternative, and so on. So you have to be careful that in terms of evaluating, and companies do have pricing specialists in their organization, and that's all they look at is if we tweak it here, we will get more, and if we reduce it more and we increase the demand, we will get more total revenue. That's the end game, is increasing total revenue. So the legalities and ethics of pricing strategy. So we need to identify these. So are there unfair trade practices? Under below cost selling, for example. Are we price fixing? Are there groups of companies coming together to say, let's all charge the same price, kind of unofficial monopolies as such? And what's the word? Oh God, begins with C. Not coercion. Collusion. Yeah, pricing, that can happen. And interestingly, you find that sometimes in local towns with price of petrol or diesel, they all tend to contact one another and say, well, we're charging this, and so on, such that no one is getting all the traffic in and at the cost of some of their colleagues on the road. So you can have that. Very hard to prove. You have price fixing accusations in the insurance industry. Why are they all so high? In the banking industry, you could find, you could say, well, there's price fixing going on there. But it can be difficult to prove it. But yet, why are all our mortgages in Ireland, for example, 4, 3, 4, 5%, which is about 3 or 4% higher than the European average, at least 2.5% higher than the European average? So you'd have to question, are there unfair practices or price fixing going on? Price discrimination. The most basic one of that we use as an example of price discrimination is if, for example, a lady wants to get her hair cut. Let's just say she wants to get her hair cut short. She goes into a hairdresser's when they're open, and has long hair and wants to get it all cut up short. You'll spend what, 100, 200 euros, whatever the case may be, 70, 80 euros. But if the same lady went down to a barber's, it might be charged 7 euros, 15 euros. Still end up with the same cut, technically, and so that's price discrimination. Just one of the classic examples of price discrimination as such, but on a more global scale, you can have price discrimination where, for example, you could be selling a product here in Ireland, we'll say for 150 euros, but then you want to sell it to a country in Africa, for example, and you might only sell it for 60 euros. That's price discrimination. And why is that? Simply because you know that no one in Africa, or in that particular country in Africa, for example, can afford 150. So you price it based on the levels of income and socio-economic backgrounds and all that. So you've done your market analysis, and you know that average incomes are this, therefore the people can afford to pay that. Provided that you're making the product for maybe 20 euros or 10 euros and so on, you're still making a profit. And then predatory pricing, it's something like the price skimming, but you might go in and take advantage of people and charge. So, for example, we have the situations now at the moment where if you want to get house insurance for and you're in a floodplain, many companies won't even touch it, but they might say, we're going to have to increase your premium. Or, for example, you folks, you're under 25, your car insurance might be high, so that could be considered to be predatory pricing. Take advantage of vulnerable people because they're more risk and more speed prone, and therefore they're more likely to have crashes. Therefore, we'll bleed them in terms of predatory pricing. Or just going in and say, because there's a rarity in a particular commodity, we have the stockpile of this product, therefore we're going to charge this, so we go in with predatory pricing. So some of these examples, as I've just explained, unfair trade practices. Laws prohibit wholesalers and retailers from selling below cost. Technically, yes, but it does go on, unfortunately. Price fixing, an agreement with two or more firms on the price they will charge for products, the kind of collusion. And price discrimination. So the Robinson Hatman Act of 1936, there must be price discrimination. Transactions must occur in interstate commerce or intercountry commerce. Seller must discriminate by pricing among two or more purchasers. And then, in other words, what are they willing to pay and what are they willing to pay as purchasers? Products must be sold. Products sold must be commodities or tangible products, so we can see the value. It's very hard to show price discrimination on services. Well, it can be difficult because there's no tangibility. With a physical product, you can see what you're getting, and you could be getting two identical products, and one might be more expensive than the other. Now, it could be they can argue that there's better components in one or slightly better performance in one, and so on. That's why we discriminate the price. And then products must be sold. Products sold must be of like grade and quality. Like grade and quality doesn't mean they have to be exactly the same, and there must be significant competitive injury. So in this case, that you're discriminating, you're able to inflict pain on your competitors. In other words, that you're able to sell at such a price that they can't possibly compete against you. So the seller's defense can be cost, market conditions, and competition. So you as a seller, you can discriminate based on these because of cost. You're able to reduce costs, or your costs are increasing, or your market conditions in a particular country are far more favorable than in another company. There's higher levels of income, therefore you're going to exploit those incomes and charge higher prices and so on. And because of competition, in this case, you might be forced to sell in one location lower than in a different location. Why? Because you want to keep out the competition and you want to remain competitive to be able to sell your product. So there are ways of defending against perceived price discrimination. It has to be proved. So predatory pricing is the practice of charging a very low price for a product with the intent of driving competitors out of the business. Now, I did say predatory, that you can exploit at high levels. That can also happen. But in this case, by definition, it's do you remember I don't know if you remember the series on TV, the Dragon's Den. Now, the UK version of it, not the Irish one, but in the UK version of the Dragon's Den, there's one of the consistent dragons was Duncan Ballantyne, the Scottish guy, fierce nice guy, brilliant guy. His background is in retirement homes and healthcare and that sort of stuff. But he started out with an ice cream round, starting selling. So he bought a van, but before he bought the van, he went in, looked at existing ice cream rounds, and you're Mr. Whippy. I don't believe I said that. Anyway, he went in to watch the existing guys going around and follow the routes, got to know the routes and so on. So then he bought his own ice cream van, and he went around before them, so he set his timing. So there was a movie made about these things. I'm pretty sure it was called the Ice Cream Wars or something like that. So he went around ahead of them and started selling at a lower price, kept driving down his price and so on. He said it was a high risk maneuver simply because, he said, eventually these guys stopped going around because they couldn't compete on the price. And he said as soon as he had blown the competition out of the water using predatory pricing tactics, he started to up his price. Happy days. But it's as I said, it's a very, very high risk maneuver for any company or business to take on, because you need to have deep pockets. You don't know how long your competitors are going to last. You don't know how deep their pockets are, and it could backfire on you. So tactics for fine tuning the base price. We look at excuse me, how we can run discounts, geographic pricing, and other special pricing tactics can be used to fine-tune the base price. So discounts. You can see that a discount, we can temporarily say, well, we're going to reduce our profits by giving a discount on the price on the product. Let's see what that does to the demand. And you can find that because something has been discounted, people will come and buy your product, therefore the demand goes up, and you could see that, yeah, okay, our total revenue has gone up. Geographic pricing. Different locations. There's no point in charging, as I said, high prices in underdeveloped countries because the money just isn't there. The incomes aren't there. And then special pricing tactics. So if you look at discounts, allowances, rebates in more detail, for value-based pricing, so the quantity of discounts they will give you two for the price of one, and you've seen this up through all your shops, pharmacies and so on. You get 2 packs of, what do you call it, oh Jesus, shower gels, for example, 2 for the price of one kind of thing, the big yellow stickers and the red writing on them, and you see that in all your shops. Cash discounts, giving money back. You buy something, buy a car, you give €1,000 back, and so on. So the whole thought of actually physically getting €1,000 into your bank account can be a huge incentive for people. Functional discounts, getting more, getting Sky Sports and Eurosports extra on your Sky box for a period of 6 months, so you're getting extra functions, extra, or you might buy an app and you're given, here's the full pro version, but this runs out after 7 days or 1 month and so on. So you've got all these functions, but you get a discount if you buy it. Then we'll give you these additional functions free if you go and go for the premium version or the pro version. Seasonal discounts, again, during the summer, it's if and when you can buy them. Ski gear can be relatively cheaper, obviously, in summer because demand is extremely low. But try buy ski gear in December, January, February. The price goes up, and similarly with summer clothing and so on. So you'll have seasonal discounts, and then you have promotional allowances. While on special offer, while for the next 2 weeks our prices are reduced, and rebates, if you buy such a quantity of these products, we'll give you a 3% rebate or a 10% rebate and so on. And 0% financing, that's a very common one now. So everything you go in and you buy a product and 0 rate financing, particularly in the cars, you'll often say this 0 rate financing. So they set a value, but they've already done their homework. They know how much money costs, so they know that they'll just charge you a price. It's already factored into the profitability, so they can say, so in other words, the percentage interest that you would be paying is somewhat factored into the cost of the monthly repayments, and therefore it says 0% interest. And the reason to do this is because the companies themselves, the BMWs, the Volkswagens, and so on, they all have their own banks and lending institutions for all intents and purposes that just finance their cars, vans, lorries, and so on and so forth. So that's how, and they borrow money at an extremely low rate from central banks, European banks, and all this sort of stuff, and then sell it on. And markdown money, that is a kind of a rare example of markdown money. I don't remember coming across it really. Markdown money, I'll come back to that one, but and then value-based pricing. So based on the value that means to you, you can charge different prices essentially. So if something is of high value to one person, might be of lower value to it. So in other words, the actual need or the want isn't as strong in one group or one location as it is in another. Therefore, your pricing has to be slightly different. Umbrellas in tropical areas or in equatorial countries, umbrellas, you might say, well, they're really for rain, and well, they say, no, it's to keep the sun off the head, but we can't charge as much as higher price there because maybe they don't last as long. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Whereas in Europe or in Ireland, you have a hell of a lot more rain, therefore we can charge a higher price for umbrellas and so on. So, but it's based on the value of the product. So value-based price, selling the price at a level that seems to be a good price compared to the price of other options. So yeah, basically the same thing, So what's your option to an umbrella? Wear jackets with hoods on them and so on and so forth. Down in the equator, no. So pricing products too low, the problem there is managers attempt to buy market share through aggressive pricing. So again, penetration pricing, if you go in too low. So managers tend to make pricing decisions based on current costs, current competitor prices, and short-term share gains rather than on long-term profitability. And the reason is simple: it's very hard to see the long term. We don't know what the competition are going to do. We don't know what new products or substitute products can come out, or substitute services. I mean, and certainly if it gets out that you're making nice profits on your product or your service, it's like attracting bees to honey. and they say, well, I'd like to get a piece of that action. So competitors are watching each other to see what they're doing, and therefore new companies can come on the block very, very, very quickly. So the geographic pricing, which I've mentioned earlier on, FOB origin, so that's essentially the free on board pricing. So we can get introductory offers. You can in different locations. You can actually come in and say, we give it you free for a period of time, and so on. Uniform delivered pricing, zone pricing, freight absorption pricing, and base point pricing. Now, some of these don't actually come into play. So, for example, the buyer absorbs the freight on costs, free on board, as I said, costs and shipping points. So, this is getting a little bit technical, but these are different areas as to when you take. So, if you buy something from China, what do you pay? Do you pay the actual product, and then you have all the carriage, the cost, transportations, and so on and so forth. So, or else is the product shipped by the company all the ways, or your manufacturer all the ways here to Europe, and now you pay the final price here in Europe, because you have all these different add-ons that can drive up the costs. Uniform deliver pricing, so the seller pays the freight charges and bills, and then the purchaser an identical flat freight charge. So this is all in cost. In other words, so if you buy something from the foreign, but now you see in Amazon or eBay and so on, so you'll always see these delivery prices listed separately. How quickly do you want it? Because it's another way of getting money. So if you want them, next day delivery, you're going to pay a premium price, a much higher price. So zone pricing, so in the US is divided into zones. So flat rates is charged to customers in a given zone. So if it's you'd see this, buy something in the UK or Ireland, and they might say free delivery, for example. Why? Because there's so much traffic going over and back that the freight traffic that they can put your products on there, and they won't charge you. But 99% of the time they've factored in some of that freight cost into the price anyway. So at least it's giving you, I'm getting this free of charge for delivery. Great, happy days. Psychologically, it's understanding behavior, human behavior. Freight absorption pricing, so the seller pays for all parts of the freight charges and does not pass them on to the buyer. So you're factoring that in as part of your cost. So the physical manufacture of the product, and then all the other costs to get that product brought from China or Taiwan or India over to Ireland to sell it. So I take on all the costs because I'm buying in bulk. So base point pricing. So the seller designates a location as a base point and charges all buyers the freight costs from that point. So getting stuff to Europe is, let's just say, costs €1,000 per container. Now distributing based on that price, we'll sell the product to different countries in Europe using the base price of what it costs us to get it to Europe in the first place. The physical manufacturing cost plus the transportation cost, the insurance, and you'll have freight forwarding costs and so on, and that costs us €1,000 per container. Now we'll sell it in different countries at slightly different prices, but at least you can't go below that base point, because that's how much it costs you to get the product to your boundaries of Europe. So other pricing tactics: single price tactic, all goods offered at the same price. Flexible pricing, different customers pay different prices. Premium customers and non-premium customers, pro prices, pro users, and so on, will have higher demands, and therefore they'll pay higher prices. Professional services pricing, which kind of will fall into most of your areas, because given that most likely you will be delivering on services as opposed to products. So used by professionals with experience, training, and certification. And that's how you build up your reputation. And the more you build up your reputation, you build up your brand. And that in itself, he must be good, because everyone's talking about him, and everyone goes to that particular physiotherapist. I mean, there's one guy down in Limerick, and he is a phenomenal, if you can even get an appointment with him, and that alone creates demand. People say, geez, I have to get to this physiotherapist down in Limerick. I think it's something like 500 quid an hour or something like that. It's some ridiculously high price, but apparently he's very good. But word of mouth. Now, he may not be exceptionally better than anyone else, but people have talked to, so-and-so is very good and this, that, the other thing, and so on. And so you will find that. So names and reputations are your brand, and how good you are, people will talk. And that's how you can have can start to charge higher prices. You might be offering exactly the same services as a physiotherapist, but you're doing it differently and better than someone else, and your reputation states that, and people perceive it. Okay, understand that it's important. People perceive that you are better, and they go away and say, "Oh, I paid €500, so my back is definitely better." Might not be. Anyway. So price lining, so several items that at specific price points. So you might have products. All these shampoos are below €5, and all those shampoos are between 5 and €12 kind of thing. So you have different levels. Again, people say, well, I'm not going to buy the cheap stuff. I'll go for the €12. I might go for the €20 price, because the perception is the higher price, the better quality. Remember, buyer behavior, so creating, and that's why you need to understand your customers. Leader pricing, sell product at near or below cost. Trying to get into the market to be the price, that this is the best price, and this is why you buy those particular products, because it's a great value for money. They're a big company, but they charge a nice price, and so on. Bait pricing, lure customers through false or misleading price advertising. That might be a case where you're selling a product and next you find, but you have to pay for this, you have to pay for the installation, and you also have to get these add-ons to make it work properly here, or you need this additional piece of equipment, and so on. So, hang on a second, you quoted me that price, or you said that's how much it costs. Now I have to get all this other stuff to get it to work. That's and they can charge, because now you bought the product and you need all this other equipment maybe, and as a consequence they kind of stitch up the price a little bit more, so it's bait pricing. Not a good practice, and that's why pricing needs to be so transparent, otherwise you lose the trust of your customers. Odd even pricing, so odd number prices imply bargains, and even number prices imply quality. And all I'll say is, for example, Dunn stores, I used to always joke about this from the day they opened, the glorified pound, or in this case the glorified euro, everything was 99 pence or €99 or $2.99, $3.99, $9.99. Why? That 1 cent below €10 creates the perception that I'm not paying €10, I'm only paying €9.99, but it's not €10. Therefore it has that effect of the appearing to be a bargain. But they're not. They're making a fortune on all. The markups are huge on these things, 14, 50%. Even number pricing imply quality. So, you go into some jewelers and €500, €1,000 for this, and so on. So it creates that perception. Now, it's strange enough, it actually works with people. But if you put in a product at €495 for a watch, and so on and so forth, you say, well, it's almost €500. But if you say €500, geez, that's bang on in terms of I'm getting a high-end watch, and so on. Maybe a high-end mid-range watch. So price bundling, combining 2 or more products in a single package. That's where would you, if you're buying tools down B&Q, you might get a screwdriver, and you get all the bits and the heads for it as well. So you're getting 2 products. You could go in just looking for different range of bits to put into your existing screwdriver, and you see these here for €20 for 50 pieces, and then you might look at beside it and see, here's for €25 you get these 50 pieces, plus you get these 2 different types of screwdrivers or wrenches and so on for that you fit the pieces into, so you get the whole set, and say, I might buy that because just in case I can't find the other one, or my original one, and all that sort of. So you get that kind of thing going on, price bundling. And 2-part pricing, 2 separate charges to consume a single good. Where would you have 2-part pricing? God, I'm trying to think. I can't. My brain is fried. Where do they have two-part pricing on the single good? If it comes to me, I'll come back to it. So, consumer penalties. Businesses impose consumer penalties if an irrevocable loss of revenue is suffered. So, if or additional transaction costs are incurred. So, business impose consumer penalties. Irrevocable or loss of revenue is suffered. If, for example, at a particular price, you raise the price and you lose consumers because it's just beyond their affordability, and as a consequence, your total revenues have dropped slightly. What you might do is push up the price even further for your remaining customers to try and recover the lost customers and revenues from those that couldn't afford the product, and that does happen. And I've noticed that in certain cosmetics and so on during the lockdown, prices have gone up and up and up. Why? Because fewer and fewer people were buying it, but they're saying we have to make a profit, and so on. Therefore, the fewer people are buying it, we'll keep upping the price. So they wanted to keep, and if at least keep, if not increase, their total revenue. Additional transaction costs are incurred. There may be additional freight charges. So, for example, again, classic, or I won't say classic, it's recent cases. The prices of containers, because of the shortage of containers and the whole disruption to transportation across the globe, the cost of containers have gone from on average $2,000 to transfer a container from one side of the world to the other to as much as $15,000 and $16,000. So these are additional transaction costs, and a lot of it is essentially bribery. We'll move your container into the fast moving lane if you pay an extra $1,000 here and $1,000, or we'll delay your products being delivered and we'll prioritize these, and if you want to jump up in the queue, so on. So that's actually happening. It's extortionist, but nevertheless these are additional transaction costs, and sometimes the customer has to bear the brunt of that. So the review of learning, I'm not going to go through all of those, but that's just a simple diagram of the points that we've discussed on up to now. Okay, folks, I'm going to take a break here. That covered learning outcomes 1, 2, and 3. We're going to continue with the remaining 2 learning outcomes, number 4 and 5, of pricing and pricing strategies and so on, and getting and setting the right price. So heading down to your area. Down to the lower corner. And here we are. So now we're going to continue with, excuse me, oh dear, discussing the product price line. So setting prices for entire product lines, what does this essentially mean? You can have the relationship between products, such as you can have complementary products or substitute products or neutral products. Taking these one step further, joint costs. So if we look at the sharing and manufacturer, for example, the best way to describe this obviously would be Audi, Volkswagen. They have the Passat and the Audi A series, A4 for example. Now the actual Passat chassis and drivetrain, the engine and gearboxes, are identical in both the Passat and the Audi, just different body types put onto them. So they have one production line essentially for the drivetrains, the engines, and so on. So a 1.9 diesel in a Passat is the same as the 1.9 diesel in the Audi. So that's an example of where, you know, they've shared costs and manufacturing and marketing several product lines over the product life cycle. So they can go to the next generation of cars and they're using the same manufacturing process. That's very evident in the car industry, for example, where there might be upgrading technologies in the production processes ever so slightly, but they're producing multiple types of product. Same for laptops, for example, the same production lines, and you might have high-end gaming laptops down to your entry-level home use laptop. They're all fundamentally the same production lines, just different components put in, such as screens, CPUs, memories, and so on, graphics cards. That's often referred to as delayed production or delayed mass production, or sometimes deferred mass production. So you make the skeleton, build out the skeleton as much as possible, and then put in the final components at the last minute. Excuse me. Okay. That should help a little bit. So if we look at the final learning outcome on this part of it, and there's a few more slides on that after that, obviously. Pricing during difficult economic times. So we have inflation and recession. So why is this important? So in high inflation scenarios, economies, cycles, we use cost-oriented tactics. So we don't really want to push up the price, so we try to drive down our costs to maintain the levels of profitability. And also we have demand-oriented tactics. So we control the price based on the level, so we're highly responsive to the demand. Now you can be doing both, actually, reducing your costs and reducing your prices, or increasing your prices, because inflation is pushing up the costs of everything. So we'd have to focus very much on trying to maintain or reduce our costs or avoid them going up to keep our profitability. So the problems with the cost-oriented tactic as such is the high volume of sales on an item with low profit margin may still make the item highly profitable. Okay, so high volume sales, total revenue. So you can keep dropping your price, even though your costs are going up so slightly, dropping your price, but selling more of it because there's a demand there for it, even in inflationary times. And eliminating a product may reduce the economies of scale. What that means that if you decide to take, for instance, in the car manufacturing scenario industry, we won't make these high-end cars anymore. Therefore, you're not fully utilizing your assets. So your economies of scale, in other words, the more products you produce, the lower the unit cost of the product. So if you stop making products, then your unit cost of the remaining products that you are manufacturing goes up. It's a simple division of cost divided by the quantity. That's all it is. So the economies of scale, large manufacturing, don't benefit. So you have machines not fully operational and parts of factory not possibly producing anything, and so on. Eliminating a product may affect the price quality image of the entire product line. So if you take out, for example, you took away all the S-Class Mercedes and the E-Class Mercedes, the perception is that, they're only focusing on the lower, mid and lower end of the C-Class and E-Class, C-Class and A-Class, for example, or B-Class. So they're getting out of the high-end luxury. So we might not benefit from new technologies and new advances in car development as such, and therefore creates the perception that you're getting a lower quality. So it can be negatively affect the image of the company. That's one way of describing it. In the cost-oriented tactic, we have delayed quotation prices, and the reason for that is just in case things change, because some raw materials can change in price. One perfect example of that is the tar they use for surfacing roads and tarmac, essentially, before they mix it with the stones. But that's transferred. Most of that comes from South America, Brazil, Mexico, and that's put into huge container ships. That isn't sold. That's all shipped towards Europe, and it's only when the tanker is in transit, as it gets closer to Europe, then it finds its customers and who's willing to pay the best price. So it could be just about 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic, and instead of going to Norway or England. They might go to Spain or further on into Italy, or come all the ways up to the Netherlands and so on. So they leave their decision making and they could even decide, well, to hell with this, we'll go to Saudi as such. They're willing to pay much higher prices for much smoother roads and so on. So we'll pay. So it's delayed quotations based on those prices. Escalator pricing, so the pricing goes up. You'll get it at this deal and it'll last for such a period of time, then it'll go up again, and then because it's an expectation, customers are conditioned to expect pricing to go up. Certain cosmetics have been going up in price, and it almost becomes an acceptable process that prices are going to go up. So do we buy more of the product now, and can it be stored, and so on, and hold pricing constant but add new fees. And this is where the whole concept of the 7 Ps, the marketing mix: product, price, promotion, and place, the 4 basics, and then physical evidence, people, and processes. Those additional 3 Ps, they're considered to be the extended marketing mix, but they are focused primarily on service parts. So when you buy any kind of a product, there is usually some level of service attached to it. It might be simple installation and so on. So for example, if you have your Sky Media or Virgin Media, they install the box and your broadband for you, you may actually look for a technician to fine tune it, and they have to book an appointment, and it's €50 or something like that for a fee. So that's how you add on these fees and services. Or you're buying your boiler for your gas cooker here, or whatever it is. Now it's implicit that you have to have that serviced almost annually. So they make their money under fees. Or if you take HP or any of the printer manufacturers, HP, Lenovo, Lennox, and so on, all of these manufacturers, they sell their product relatively cheap. Okay, 50, 60, 70, maybe €100, whatever the case may be, and you get a photocopier, printer, an email scanning cloud, all this sort of stuff built into the machine. But they make the money on the cartridges, so they're charging higher fees, and oftentimes they can be half the price of the actual physical machine itself. So cost-oriented tactics, price increases leads to decreased demand, which then increase your production costs. It's a kind of a spiral. So maintaining a fixed gross margin, if you want to continuously make the same profit, and if you increase your prices, there will be a drop-off. Elasticity of price and demand, and as a consequence, you're reducing your production levels because the demand has dropped off. Therefore, the unit cost increases. That's what essentially this means. So really, when you're looking at price increases, you have to be very careful to understand the knock-on effect. So it isn't just slap a price onto this and let's increase it by 3.5% next week and so on. It has consequences. It has to be thought out very carefully. Demand-oriented pricing, and we call it price shading. So the use of discounts by salespeople to increase demand, and for one or more products in a product line. So you might buy, if for example you buy a razor, you might get some blades extra with this. And as a consequence, you're charging a higher price. So if you went on just looking for the blades on their own, so geez, these are expensive. But if you buy a pack where you get the razor and a few blades, which is I'm getting a whole deal here. So it kind of shades your judgment in terms of what you're actually getting. So you have to be quite, disciplined in what you're buying a lot of the time, and not to be, coerced into buying more than you actually want. So demand-oriented tactics. So strategies to make demand more inelastic. What we mean by inelastic, that there is no the effect of an increase in price only has a marginal drop off in demand, only a marginal slight drop off, but the overall total revenue goes up. One of our classic examples are cigarettes. Not that you know anything about cigarettes, but when the government decides to go to tax cigarettes, there's immediately a drop off. And manufacturers don't worry about this because it's a habit. Okay, so may say it's a disease, but people will eventually come around and say, the hell, I paid the extra 50 cent onto a pack. I don't even know what the price of a pack of cigarettes is now. And another one would be electricity or gas charges. When prices go up on these areas, we say, oh yeah, we'll go around, turn off all the lights and make sure we're saving money and turning off switches and all this sort of stuff. But then we default back into our old habits. It could take a week, it could take 2 weeks, it could take only a couple of days, but we go back into our old habits of leaving lights on and this sort of stuff and so on. So the demand comes back up at the newer higher price. So that's why we look at inelasticity. So we need to be able to measure the responsiveness of consumers and consumer behavior to a change in price. That's what price elasticity of demand essentially is. So if it's less than 1, that means that there's a smaller drop off in demand, therefore your total revenues will go over. If it's greater than 1, it means that there'll be a bigger drop off of demand and your total revenues will start to decline. So being equal to 1, static kind of pricing, increase the price, the demand stays the same, your total revenues stay the same, and below, your total revenues increase. So we cultivate selected demand, create unique offerings, change package design, and heighten buyers' dependence on it. You know. Anyway, so yes, you get people bought into it, so you become fixated with the product, you won't change it and so on, so you really have hooked the customer. That's why we say heighten their dependency on it. So for example, we now have to have TV and broadband. Why? Because the companies are offering more products such as Netflix and so on, so where you actually need to have well, that's not technically true, but you'd have to use your broadband, or more product is being offered on the internet, so you don't have to have the TV, but you need the broadband. So they've created a dependency on the broadband product as well, and then maybe offering a phone service with the bundle. So creating these unique offerings, and oftentimes the unique offerings, if you stay with the likes of entertainment as such, you take Disney Plus, they are using only the Marvel, and they have the franchise for all the Star Wars movies and all that sort of stuff. They own them, so on. So that's they're creating a unique offering. Netflix itself created a new unique offering by block releasing all the episodes of particular, or all the series episodes in bulk. You know, House of Cards, whatever, Orange is the New Black and so on. So you can binge watch these, responding to the demand. So they cultivated selected demand. So people who actually wanted to binge watch could do so. Some of us might be more disciplined and say watch the first couple of episodes and then the next couple of episodes, or watch the whole thing over a pizza and beer party, starting on a Saturday evening and finishing up on the Monday morning kind of thing. So in times of recession, we look for value-based prices. So when money is tight, essentially, we have to show that we're given more, that you're getting better value for what you're spending. Even though we mightn't be dropping the prices, we might be convincing people that they're getting more. And that's why we use this bundling and unbundling. So you think you're getting extra bits, you know, maybe an extra 2 months onto your contract as such, or an additional feature in part of the bundling. Or we might unbundle, say, well, we're going to remove these features because it doesn't pay us. People, recessionary times, people can't afford to have them, so we'll drop the price of our broadband, or we'll take some of the packages, we'll mix the packages differently. We'll take off Eurosport, we'll take off Sky Cinema and all this, and we'll create a new price point, so a new version of the product. That's the bundling and unbundling approach. So supplier strategies during recession, obviously to see an opportunity, they want to renegotiate price to you as a manufacturer or a service provider, so they look for higher prices. Offering help, now that's a curious one, because the help could be in maybe free installation or free advice or free help desk, or alternatively, if you were a manufacturer and you're dealing with a supplier, or you're using equipment that requires a supplier to provide components to you, they might offer help and say, well, we'll extend the credit terms. You don't have to pay us within 30 days, we'll extend it to 40 days and so on, but you must guarantee that you keep buying from us and so on. And keeping the pressure on in terms of trying to get customers to buy the products, and paring down suppliers. So the more suppliers you actually have, the more costly it actually can be, because of all the transactional costs, the administration of dealing with all these different suppliers. So let's cut down the few and limit the range. So ultimately the consumer loses out because choice isn't there, and therefore they're forced to have to buy these smaller range of products, and the prices might be high, particularly if there's little or no competition. So that's it, folks, and that diagram there is just very simply a synopsis or a summary, a one-pager on the pricing during inflation and demand learning outcome as such. Now it's a little bit shorter, so I will probably add these two videos together. I will actually. Second. So that's it, folks. That covers everything on setting the right price, which is, as I said, it's an important element of marketing. Obviously, it's part of the marketing mix, but all others depend on it. So, for example, if you're setting the right price, your packaging could help you determine your price, because it might be such a style of packaging that it's pleasing to the eye. Because remember, there's a whole psychology behind this on consumer behavior and so on, and marketeers exploit this. The nice packaging and nice colors and blah 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 blah, using celebrities and so on, so convince people. That's the whole about the convincing people to buy the product and pay more and so on. So that's their job. And the more they can do that, the more money comes into the company. The more money comes into the company, the more product you can make and more profit, and so on, so on. So that's it, folks, on the pricing side of things. It covers a couple of other elements related to the marketing mix, but more than enough for you there to be able to determine your pricing and taking a particular strategy. Okay, folks, that's it on pricing, and we'll take it easy. Talk to you later. Okay, cheerio. Bye.